Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. Okay, we're going to get into this today. What the election of Sarah McBride, a biological male who identifies as female, as the first transgender congresswoman, and how that's ignited this thing on Capitol Hill, kind of a fierce debate about what's going on, about who should use bathrooms, and into this realm of biological males playing in biological female sports, and what's right and what's fair, trying to sifting through the noise here is what we're going to try on this Monday, just coming out of the weekend. So just give you some backdrop here, what's happening on Capitol Hill. Representative Nancy Mace responded to Sarah McBride's election by introducing a bill to prevent biological men from using women's bathrooms, defending the safety and the dignity of women and girls, is how she's phrasing it. And critics are arguing that this is an essential step, an essential stand against the erosion of what they call women's rights. While supporters of McBride dismissed this bill as, outright discriminatory. Here's Nancy Mace, a quick brief.
Biological men into women's private spaces. I will stand in the brink and stand in the way of anyone on the radical left who thinks that it's okay for a penis to be in a women's locker room or a bathroom or a changing room. Hell no. I am not going to stand for it. And the speaker said it would be in the House rules package. If it's not, I'll be ready with a motion, a privileged motion to force a vote on this. This is not okay.
So we are going to get into more of what Nancy Mace said later on, but it should be noted that Sarah McBride says she's going to abide by this policy. She says she doesn't agree with it, but she's going to abide by it so she can get to the work of for the people that elected her into Congress. Speaker Mike Johnson, you heard Nancy Mace mention him quickly there, initially sidestepped the issue here, the controversy, but then later reaffirmed a commitment to what he said was common sense principles, saying that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and kind of left it there. Meantime, there are voices like Marjorie Taylor Greene demanding even stronger action in this, framing the pushback against transgender ideology as a broader mandate from the American people fed up with ideological overreach. And as this debate goes on and it rages, it really does. McBride accuses Republicans of using the issue as a distraction, but others see this as a critical fight for safeguarding the integrity of spaces for women and children. And Sarah McBride will say, well, I see it as a fight to safeguard the spaces for transgender individuals. All right, so we're going to get into all this in just a moment, discuss this aspect of the issue. What is considered a safe space for all sides involved here? My guest today is Jamie O'Brien, a transgender woman, an activist who sees things from a more independent perspective. Interesting conversation coming up in a few seconds here. We'll get into that in a moment. Also, just a reminder to chime in, comment, ask questions if you would like to Jamie and to me in the comments section of YouTube, on X, on Facebook, wherever you're watching this program. And I'll get to those in just a moment. Also, a reminder, the best way that you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe and click on the notification bell, watch the programs, and share them. That's a huge help for us here, everyone here at Tom Jordan Live. Okay, this historic election sparking a huge debate now. Sarah McBride, a biological man identifying as a transgender woman, was elected as the representative for the state of Delaware, becoming the first transgender congresswoman. Her election has ignited significant concerns, though, about the implications for women's spaces in Congress. And you see Nancy Mace there. She's an advocate now, what she calls protecting women's privacy. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, and she introduced a bill to ensure that biological men cannot access women's bathrooms and locker rooms. Mace framed this move as a real stand for protecting the rights and the safety of women and girls, and rejecting the idea of biological men in female-only spaces. It's a bit complex, and we're going to dive into this. Jamie O'Brien is very familiar with the issue. Born male, now living for a long time and identifying as a female transgender woman, an individual. Jamie, it's so good to have you, and it's good to talk to you again on this, what, of course, is a complicated and controversial issue. Nice to see you.
It's always good to see you, Tom. Like you mentioned, I'm actually not so independent. I'm actually extremely conservative, and at least I believe I am, and the Constitution is the core of where I try to distinct between my beliefs, um, my rights, and privileges that we all get to enjoy here in this country. So, without going deeper into my background, I think this is
I think we may have lost. There we go. Now we got it back.
yeah.
For a
So,
moment, we lost your audio. Go ahead. Say the
okay,
last 5 seconds of what you said. Say that
I,
again.
I'll I think we forgot what the transgender community originally asked for. And I don't think the actual transgender community is asking for anything more than this. When we are done with our transition and our, yes, still originally male bodies, at least anatomically match that of people who are born as women, um, when we reach that point, we then have the same issues as those that are born female who were blessed genetically to be female. So, um, we're in a very similar boat to cis women. And then the only other thing that was never really resolved prior to the pandemic that needs to be resolved is we're supposed to go through a psychiatric evaluation that for months or years before we actually transition. And when a doctor was willing to sign a script that said, this person is now under medical care, doing their real life test, you know, to determine whether or not they, have the mental and the true need to transition. Um, that those people would be the only ones as the soon to be house rep or house rep.
Hmm.
Said have outdoor plumbing. Uh, could be in a restroom. Those people should never be in a changing room by any stretch.
Yeah, so let's get into that because you do have a different perspective from many in the transgender community. And I know you've gotten pushback on that as well. You got pushback on both sides of this in a sense, but you are conservative. And so the more liberal, I guess, transgender community has not liked your stance on these issues. But before we dive into it, and I want to get into the psychology behind this because we know that there's, psychological evaluations that need to take place, which you support, which is now kind of being thrust by the wayside. But when it regards to, Sarah McBride, her election here, the first transgender congresswoman that's been elected to the House of Representatives, there's a lot of concerns now. Okay, what does this mean? How is this going to play out on Capitol Hill when it relates to women's spaces? And Nancy Mace, she's come out very openly. We're going to hear from her in just a bit about how she was raped. She was sexually assaulted. She does not want to see a biological man, and she gets real kind of graphic about what she might see in a locker room, for example. She doesn't think that is fair in Congress. And so, how does this, do you think, legislative aim sit with the broader, I guess, transgender community, and what, in your view, is the right way to handle this situation?
Well, I'm going to kind of phrase this in immigration terms. I and the transgender community, uh, we go for the legal immigration version. We go, we talk to a doctor, we get an independent confirmation of what's going through our heads, and then we go through a surgery, and then we have to send our paperwork in to the federal government, get our passports changed, and then depending on the state laws, you can either get your driver's license changed before or after. Here in Michigan, we have, at least when I transitioned, we had to change. We couldn't change our driver's license gender until our actual, passport gender was changed. And and then they keep a copy of the affidavit of the surgeon on record at the patent office or at the passport office, so that if ever it's found that a doctor lied on that affidavit, they have problems. And that's a respectful way for us to um, use those spaces. And it was all we ever asked for until it was like during the pandemic, what was already going the wrong direction just went nuts. And now you got people. I have three kids that their parents have come to me, and just one day here in Michigan, they just decide, oh, I've been dressing as a female long enough, so they go to Planned Parenthood and start getting their estrogen. No behavioral health intervention at all, other than I would like my estrogen, and they get their estrogen.
Okay, so I want to get into that because
Yeah.
so we can talk about the bathroom bill and all that,
Yeah.
and that can go back and forth for a long time. But you're dealing into kind of the deeper aspect of the issue here is that we know that those who are identifying as transgender, the rates have skyrocketed over probably the past 4 or 5 years in terms of suddenly you look at high schools, you look at middle schools, suddenly there are these kids who maybe they were introduced to this idea of maybe they're not the gender that they were born with. And we're finding out that a lot of that introduction of that idea is coming from psychologists who now are, and I think it's legal, it's the law now in Michigan that if you are a psychologist, if you practice in this realm, you have to affirm when a child comes to you and says, "I think I wasn't born a boy, I was born a girl." As a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you have to affirm that under the threat of maybe getting your license stripped away from you if you don't. What is that doing? What's happening in that space? The introduction maybe from the quote mental health experts here. Is this primarily, in your view, how more and more kids and people are being introduced to this idea that maybe they're not the gender that they were born with?
More and more, the kids are just, if you remember back to the 70s, like I do, you have this group of kids that were, the pot smokers and stuff, and they go hide off in the corner and smoke their drugs. Now you have these little groups of kids that, for whatever reason, didn't socialize, and they found themselves in a group of liberal LGBT kids, and they experiment, and their undeveloped brains think, oh, this is kind of cool, and they never see a therapist at all. But yes, the therapists can get in trouble in Michigan if they ever question somebody's self-identifying. And honestly, what's the point in going to a therapist if the therapist can't take their years of wisdom and experience and use it to help any patient find their way to becoming whole? I would have loved to have found a way to become whole and not end up with all the crap that goes with being transgender. But here I am, and at least internally, I'm at peace, and that's good enough for me.
So okay, so that now, if it's coming from the PhD's office, essentially a psychologist, and they're no longer allowed, based on legislators, lawmakers on at the state capitol, they're no longer allowed to essentially practice their area of expertise, and they're mandated now to only do one thing, and that is affirm an ideology. What does that end up leading to? I mean, do you think that, and I wasn't planning to go this direction with you on this, but do you think if a 14-year-old child or maybe 12-year-old child is told by a doctor, a PhD, that yes, what you need to do to help solve your depression or your anxiety is to transition to a different gender? Do you think that, as we're told to by many Democratic legislatures, that is going to resolve their issues, their mental health issues, or their crises of depression and anxiety down the road?
I think that has a 90% chance of having a suicide victim by age 22 or 25.
Why is
And
that? Expand on that.
Well, because back when real science was being done about us, we were presumed to be like 1 in 1,800 people, 1 in 2,200 people. Maybe that number went down a little bit when society started to allow us to be open and start feeling safe in public and things like that. So maybe it's 1 in 1,500 people, but now they're saying it's like 1 in 200, 1 in 180, and that means that the 10% of us that are actually transgender are still there. And then you've got these 90% of people that the therapist can't treat their actual behavioral issues because they're not allowed to. And the result is the good therapists I know won't take. Once you come out and identify, they just go, that isn't my center of expertise. Let me refer you to somebody that takes care of transgender patients. That's what the good therapists are doing now, some of them.
Yeah.
Because if they can't provide guidance to help this person to become whole, which is at the end of the day, a therapist's job is not to fix you, is to provide an environment where you can become whole and or healed. If they can't do that, then they need to see patients that they can do that for.
Yeah.
And
I've seen the science on this change so dramatically based on ideology, not real data. And you mentioned that, there's a 90% chance of a 21, 22-year-old being a suicide victim based on these recommendations and advice and essentially mandates from legislators to a 12-year-old kid. And I've talked to many people now, not many, but some people who are going through detransitions because they were told one thing, it turned out to be false, and they're deeply regretting their decision as a child. And now they're in that frame of 22, 24, 26, maybe 30 years old, and really are kind of stuck now in a body they truly don't feel that they belong in because it has been permanently changed by a surgeon who didn't give all the information, or the informed consent no longer is allowed somehow. And that's supposed to help the child. So all of this craziness is now, manifesting itself in different ways. And now you have this situation, for example, on Capitol Hill, where Representative Nancy Mace feels threatened, and I think many women do as well, that there may be still an anatomically male individual walking into their changing space and exposing his anatomically male genitalia to that woman who that's the last thing they want to see. And somehow the woman is being called hateful, and there's death threats against the woman, and they just have to buck up and accept this no matter what damage is done to that woman's psyche on it. So what is your thought about what's happening as it relates to, bathrooms and the anatomical? Somebody could say, listen, I've been transitioned, I'm anatomically now a woman, but how do you prove that? You're not going to drop your pants in front of somebody to prove it, right? So you just have to go on somebody's word that that's the way they are now?
The way you be. First off, I waited until full transition before I ever went into a women's multi-stall restroom or changing room because I didn't want what to me was a birth defect to be seen by anybody. So it was a two-way street for me. But for many, while they're transitioning and they're under doctor's care, doctors that are able to say, I'm a little concerned about the way you're behaving, and can sort of pull back on the transition. That's something that's been taken away in Michigan, at least. But women as a group and as a volume are the most abused group of people that exist in this country as a volume, not as a percentage. Unfortunately, I think Black transgender women have the percentage number for abuse and murder. So women, yes, if you're, what I can do is I can pull out my ID and look, I did everything this country asked for me. I came to this point in my life honestly. I didn't deceive the public. I didn't do any of that stuff. The current people, I literally have a couple of people which I just am furious with here in Monroe County. They literally one day decide they feel like a guy when they get dressed, and the next day they feel like a woman when they get dressed, and it's like, no, you don't get to do that. But now they can, and it's
now they can.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, I agree with that. You shouldn't be able to change your gender every other hour or every other day because it's not only confusing to you as an individual. I think the individual needs help, but it's also very confusing to the public at large. And I think that's an infringement on other people's rights. If you're demanding based on how you feel in that moment to use someone else's restroom, or I mean, it does end up impacting other people. And so this also translates to sports. Obviously, we've seen this has been a debate now for several years with biological men playing in biological female sports, and we're seeing now the big story is used to be Thomas, I forget her first name, with Riley Gaines and all that, and now it's this San Jose State University volleyball team that there's teams going up against San Jose State University, the Spartans, are forfeiting their games because there is a very tall biological male identifying as a female in that sport, and it's dangerous to the other females on the other team. So they are now forfeiting those games, and suddenly San Jose State University becomes in the championship series, and they're winning these games by forfeit. But what it's doing though is it's infringing on the rights, you might say, of these female athletes on the other team. So the fact that the Biden-Harris administration, they have implemented these policies that require schools to allow biological males in female sports and spaces to receive federal funding. It's a misuse of Title IX in that. The original intent of Title IX was far different than what has been, propagated and kind of the way it's manifested itself. Do you feel like this incoming administration will do something, and should the administration do something, in your view, regarding sports and transgenderism?
Well, sports are a lot easier than bathrooms and dressing rooms to handle. Um, if any human has ever been exposed to enough testosterone, whether it naturally was occurring or they took a medical treatment that caused their muscle tones to change and stuff like that, you should be banned from women's sports, period. There's no real negotiation to have. I think Caitlyn Jenner, an actual, true, amazing athlete back in the 70s, phrases that, really well. It's our bodies are just not. My mind can be female, my spirit can be female, but my body wasn't built that way. And although I anatomically, to blend in, have had changes to my body. Um, you know, if I hit, for some reason, if I hit a woman, a cis woman, and they're not like wielding a weapon at me, I should be put up on charges for assault. And that is true of anyone who has a history of, of once having the body and the strength of being male. There's that, so that goes beyond sports, and it's a simple answer. We don't belong in any competition where we either endurance or physical strength or a combination of the two is in direct competition with a human body that never had the enhancing features of testosterone running through its vein or their veins. So I hope that's a pretty simple, direct answer from someone who's had a lot of time to think about this.
Yeah, it seems simple to me too. I mean, I agree with you very much on that. And I think it's not complicated like we're trying to make it out to be, that this is somehow, there's no difference between, the muscle mass or the strength between a biological male and female. And we're ignoring the obvious. It's like the elephant in the room. It's like, okay, this is not the same. But you've spoken out about these issues. It seems fair. You've received a lot of pushback from people as well, threats to your own life, and you've been canceled in terms of college campuses. You were going to speak on these issues, your perspective as a transgender activist and female, and yet those people in that your community are the ones who have canceled you, labeling you as a danger to the transgender community. Can you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, that's send in the clowns, I guess, is the phrase that comes to mind. But the I'm one of the older transgender people. I lived my entire life knowing what I was. In my mid 40s, I finally needed to reconcile it. Um, and, um, and I've watched um, the interactions. So for the very community that when I was awkward and afraid and, they embraced me, um, but they also were trying to indoctrinate me to a liberal um, agenda, and that just didn't wash well, or didn't just couldn't reconcile in my brain a liberal agenda. So there are groups of LGBT community that are very conservative, and hopefully later I can mention who they are. But um, yes, I was supposed to have a speech about restroom use of all things, and becoming whole at the community college in Monroe. And the day before this happens, I get a call from the administration of the college, and they say, look, the LGBT community, is so upset that you're speaking and thinks that your words are so dangerous that they are threatening to hurt and possibly even kill you if you go on. And I did go. I waited too long, but I did go to the police and try to file charges. But unfortunately, none of the witnesses within the college to this event.
You wanted to file charges against the college?
No, I wanted to file charges against whoever threatened my life.
Who was threatening your life? Do you know who that person was?
According to what was reported to me, it is a gay straight alliance group within the community college.
The Gay Straight Alliance group was threatening your life, not conservatives, which they were saying was the danger to you. It was the Gay Straight Alliance threatening your life because your opinion as a transgender female.
It was Republicans that actually said, Jamie, we would make sure that you were okay.
So the Republicans were coming to your side. So, okay, this is crazy. Okay, so what we're told by, I've heard it. I remember this happening to you. What we're being told, and which is being reported by the media, is that the conservatives are the danger here, and we need to stand up to, for transgender rights, because if we don't, their lives are being put at risk by essentially conservatives. When your situation came up, and the danger was not coming from conservatives, but from the very group that was crying violent threats from conservatives. It was coming from that group instead. I know the media wouldn't cover it. I tried to cover this. It was demanded that I do not touch this issue. This was happening, and this is what people need to understand about the news media. It is so biased, and it was demanded that I do not touch this issue. And a serious, consequences if you do. We don't do this, Tom. And this is how the media approached your story. How did that make you feel?
Well, feel is not always relevant. Again, I'm not liberal, so I don't run. I certainly have feelings, but my rights were violated. My actual rights to free speech on a government-owned campus was stopped. I mean, how is that different than when any other conservative speaker gets up to say their thing and they get booed down, or they get canceled, or why am I different? Just because I don't think Republicans think I am. I think but this is when a Republican becomes dangerous. When you are so full of yourself that you think that equals means that I'm equal with these extra benefits, and you're just equal, and you start coming after their families and you start attacking their beliefs, then you deserve to get some pushback. But in Monroe County, Michigan, all the Republicans know me. They're like, Jamie is not here. There's no desire to hurt anyone's other family, cause any issues with, and I think in some ways I confuse them because I'm just so not what the news media tells them I'm supposed to be, and so when I hear, you know, a conservative go too far, like banning everyone that used to be male, that was declared male at birth, uh, not allowed. I'm not okay with that. To say anyone with outdoor plumbing is not allowed in a women's changing room or bathroom, I can see that as being a fair agreement. The only ask that I will tell you most, even conservative transgender women want, is while they're under the medical care of a therapist who is allowed to pull back and slow down the transition if there's suddenly behavioral issues that start to form, or weird observations that the patient comes back to the therapist with. Um, that during that real life test that we're required to go through for approximately a year, that can be done also. But that's, again, you're also talking about 10% of the people running around right now,
saying that
basically.
they're transgender or they feel
Yeah,
that they are.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like
uh,
10% of them are like you're right. So I find this amazing to me because I think even if there are, say, conservatives who disagree with your perspective on these issues, which I think a lot of them probably agree with you, but even if they do disagree with you, they're not like threatening to kill you. Like
no,
they're like disagreement is allowed. Like argumentation should be welcomed into even this space as well, so long it's not a threat to your life. But what I have seen, even based on this Nancy Mace situation, that the death threats are pouring in from the other side, and that's what seems to me to be not just ironic but completely hypocritical because they're saying that is the opposite is true. It's the violence, and I know that there has been violent attacks against transgender members of the transgender community. Have you noticed that those attacks are coming from one particular political ideology, or is it something else altogether?
well, as you know, there have been 8 separate times in the course of my transition life where an attack of some kind, I'm not going to go into the severity of on the air, but um, none of them happened in rural conservative America. They all happened in cities. They
Hmm.
all happened in dense population centers. And like I mentioned once when you interviewed me before, when somebody points a knife at me, I don't ask their political views. Um, I just make sure that I am no longer in danger as quickly as possible.
All right. Wow. Well, violence is never acceptable. It never is, and I think most people agree with that. But in terms of where the real threats are coming from, I don't think it's accurately been described in the media and from especially one particular political party. It's they're ramping up this fear mongering, saying it's coming from a group that it's really not coming from in large part. What do you foresee? I mean, there's a lot of rhetoric out there, and with Donald Trump being now elected, and there's seemingly a mandate to that the American people have kind of because they voted him both in the popular vote and the electoral college, and he's won that there is some sort of a mandate to pull back on what are some extreme policies. And you just touched on the issue of, everyone has equal rights and some people have equal rights plus benefits. What do you think is going to happen in this space we're discussing today in regards to those extra rights that some people seem to have?
Um, well, when I voted for Trump this time, um, the little prayer I said to myself was, "Please be the Trump of 2016, the one that hadn't been attacked, hadn't been shot at, hadn't had all of these liberal people of both the LGBT community and every other community uh, think of nothing else but to be sharks in the water looking for a chance to attack." Um, Please remember the person you were in 2016, and remember that you know Caitlyn Jenner. She vouched for you. I wish I had been in a position to vouch for you. And I'm sorry all that stuff happened, but that was all liberals, whether they were transgender or not. That was all liberals doing that. And there are a growing number of vocal conservative LGBT groups that 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 know this is all nonsense. But again, I hope Trump is a big enough person to realize that he's not after all of us. He's after the liberals that paid no attention to the Constitution and our rights and privileges that have been given over time to men and women. That's the fact that we have separate restrooms is a privilege that our forefathers decided was a really good idea, and I agree with them. But let's go into a little mental play for a second. Let's say the bill goes through and no biological man is allowed in a women's room, and then no biological woman is allowed in a men's room at the House. Well, probably the first thing that Democrats will do is start having all kinds of conventions and things for transgender men. And guess where they're going to go to the restroom? And they outwardly don't look like women anymore. And they're not women mentally or spiritually. And so they're not only are they going to be in the women's room, they're going to be pissed that they have to go to the women's restroom. And again, this is a topic where maybe the Republicans need to say, you're not letting the liberals define what a woman is. Please don't let them define what a transgender person is either. And define what you think a legitimate transgender person is, so that we can still live in peace with everybody. But no, I'm not. It's hard to even put words around it because my emotions are messing with my logical brain at this point. But so if you can chime in with another question, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I just want to. I'll just end it with this, because I do remember. You said, I hope it's the same Donald Trump as we saw in 2016, and I remember vividly in 2016 that there were the same groups of individuals saying that he's going to essentially kill liberals of all stripes. And I remember the day after he was elected, I got a text message from a person I know who is in the a homosexual person I know, and said that he felt that he was going to be killed now that Donald Trump was elected president. And all this fear-mongering that was put up by the far left never came to fruition. It wasn't true. It wasn't true back then, obviously, and demonstrably it was not true, and it's not true today. And I do think that one of the things, you like Donald Trump or not, the one thing you have to respect about him, despite what people have said regarding him, is the fact that he respects the Constitution and he respects individual civil liberties. Everyone should be treated equally. Nobody gets extra special benefits based on whatever reason. We're all equals. We all have individual rights. And it's spelled out in the Bill of Rights. It's spelled out in the Constitution. And, you can go through all our original documents. And that's what he prioritizes. Regardless if you like his personality or not, and his character or whatnot, at least he's got that going for him. And I think that's what our country is founded on. I know it is. So it's those individual rights and a running away from authoritarianism. And it's sad to me what the liberals in this sense have tried to do to portray Donald Trump and to mischaracterize him. And I think people have woken up, thanks actually not to the legacy media outlets who did not do their job, but to independent journalists and social media that allow the real truth to get out, and the Joe Rogans of the world that kind of talk to him about these issues. And hey, wow, what he said is completely opposite of what I was told he was going to say. So anyway, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for speaking out regularly on these issues and being open about it and standing firm and strong. Jamie O'Brien, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's always good to talk to you also.
Thank you. Jamie O'Brien. All right. Listen, what Congresswoman Nancy Mace has proposed in legislation, I know it's controversial, but it's this bill in the House. And it would simply, if you want to just break it down to what it is, it would allow women to use bathrooms and locker rooms without the fear that biological males are going to be right there with them, changing and exposing themselves in front of women. We're talking about male anatomical parts that should not be in there. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why anyone would argue for that, in support of that, based on how an individual might feel in their head. They think, or at least they're telling you that. You don't know if it's true or not. And there have been examples of biological males who are pretending that they're identifying as a woman, going into locker rooms, and then, you can guess what the threat is that does exist out there. Let's be real. We're realists here at Tom Jordan Live, and the reality is that a lot of men will do whatever it takes to go in and maybe observe women changing. Those types of things happen. We need to protect women from that. And the media likes to frame this, what Nancy Mace is doing, as an infringement on rights and showing a lack of dignity to a new member of Congress. I want to watch how ABC News handled this and how Nancy Mace handled it back.
So Congresswoman Mace has put forward this bill that would essentially ban, here she comes down the stairs, actually, we're going to try to talk to her as she comes this way, but would ban, in a sense, a newly elected member of the United States House of Representatives, Sarah McBride, Congressperson Sarah McBride, elect from Delaware, from using, here she goes, here's Congresswoman Mace. Congresswoman Mace, can I ask you a question as you walk here? So the question is, with your piece of legislation about banning women from using...
100% yes.
My question to you is...
And it doesn't go far enough. I'll be filing more bills.
You have said that it was created in response to Congresswoman-elect McBride.
100%.
But should legislation be created targeted at one specific person?
It doesn't mention anyone in the legislation, but
you've said it was aimed at her.
No, I have said it's a result of this. I'm not going to allow biological men into women's private spaces. I will stand in the brink and stand in the way of anyone on the radical left who thinks that it's okay for a penis to be in a women's locker room or a bathroom or a changing room. Hell no. I am not going to stand for it. And the Speaker said it would be in the House rules package. If it's not, I will be ready with a motion, a privileged motion, to force a vote on this. This is not okay. I'm a survivor of rape. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. And I'm not going to allow any man in any female private spaces.
Now, Speaker,
end of story. And by the way, I'm getting death threats from men pretending to be women. Why is it that these crazy people, the insanity, the radical left, are willing to kill women over a man's right to be in a women's restroom?
Speaker Johnson has said he wants to treat every new member with the words dignity and respect. Forcing this congressperson to go into a male restroom, is that dignity and respect?
Forcing women to share private spaces with men is not dignity and not respect. And I'm absolutely going to stand in the way of anyone who thinks it's okay for a man to be in our locker room, in our changing rooms, in our dressing rooms, in women's bathrooms. And in fact, if you agree with that, you're crazy.
I think she's right. I think he is crazy. And those people at ABC News, I mean, I've watched other stories that ABC News has put out. It is completely on the other side of this. That reporter there it seems anyway, ABC News in general is opposed to Nancy Mace's legislation. Focused on the lack of dignity caused to the biological male without ever addressing or considering not only the lack of dignity for the females in locker rooms, but also the real sense of danger these women feel. There are biological truths here, and they must be the anchor of the policies that are being implemented. Society can't function if we abandon objective biological realities. It's not just made up. This is biological. This is science. It's the science and the data. Allowing biological men to enter women's spaces, no matter how they identify, undermines fundamental truths. And it creates a whole lot of confusion, as we're seeing throughout our society, that erodes trust in public policies and these institutions. Women's rights are non-negotiable, same as men's rights. And for decades, women have fought for safe and private spaces. And to now jeopardize these hard-won protections in favor of a radical ideology is a betrayal of every woman and girl who relies on those safeguards for safety and dignity. I mean, Title IX was meant to protect girls and women, and now it's doing the exact opposite. These are radical ideologies. And these people now coming out and threatening to kill Nancy Mace and threatening to kill other people. Our guest, Jamie O'Brien, was targeted by the Gay Straight Alliance Group, which is a far-left gay organization, many on college campuses. They're the ones that threatened to kill Jamie O'Brien, not the conservatives. And so they got her kicked off of campus from speaking to a group from her perspective about this issue. Not allowed. She's dangerous. We need to take her out, essentially, is what they were saying. And it's about erasure, erasing those people that are opposed to far-left LGBTQ ideology. It's not about inclusion. It's about getting rid of those who disagree with them. And women's rights become subordinated to these ideological agendas. And it diminishes the unique challenges and the unique experiences of biological women. It's a totally slippery slope. It drives me nuts that anybody would absolutely agree with that side of it. They can't objectively look at this. Bathrooms and locker rooms, that's today. Tomorrow, it's going to be even more private spaces or competitive environments. Once the line is crossed, the president will allow further encroachment on biological and cultural norms. Nothing is normal about this. And I don't mind saying that. You're going to threaten to kill me. That's totally on you. It's just objective truth. So I support Nancy Mace in this, a woman who has survived rape and sexual assault, trying to protect other women who have obviously, some have obviously been subjected to the same. And she's trying to protect other women from being subjected to the same. So common sense should prevail in this. And it's not what you've been hearing from legacy media outlets like ABC News. It's not these radical conservatives who are trying to strip away rights of radical far-left ideologues. So there's a long-term cultural impact here, and I think normalizing policies that blur biological lines, it says more than blur them, everyone's confused. It's going to have generational consequences, and we're seeing that in our kids now growing up under this ideology, particularly in the last 4 years, where schools now are teaching kids that this is the way to go. What's going to happen to these kids when they become adults in a few years? Well, this is a generational change and a transition that's going on, and I hope the pendulum begins to swing back the other way. It seems like it's starting to, but we're not even close to being there just yet. All right, we're going to get into some other headlines here, but first I do want to bring up a very important message from my good friends at Executive Wealth Management. Yes, live with confidence. You can do that. Wealth is very complex, but with the right partner, it doesn't have to be. Executive Wealth Management is dedicated to simplifying the complexities of managing your wealth by offering integrated solutions that cover every aspect of your financial life, from retirement and financial planning to investment management and even tax and legal strategies. Executive Wealth Management brings it all together so you can focus on what matters most, living your life with confidence. Their team at Executive Wealth Management, they have a whole slew of experts, and they work seamlessly together across these key areas to ensure your financial future is secure and well managed. They take the stress out of wealth management by providing a comprehensive, personalized approach that is tailored to your unique needs. They are dear friends of mine. I trust them implicitly with my finances. You should as well. Discover how they can simplify your financial journey. Visit EWMadvisors.com. That's EWMadvisors.com. Learn more about their integrated wealth management solutions. Executive Wealth Management. Wealth is complex, and they simplify it. All right, it is Monday, so we're going to get a little manic Monday here. I want to highlight some things that have happened. Some things we couldn't get to last week. Typically, we'll talk about the day prior Sunday shows, but this is one from a week prior that we didn't get to last week. Larry Kudlow is on Fox Business. His conversation with the former chief of staff from the Department of Defense and current candidate to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, from the interview over at Fox Business, where Kash Patel is standing firm against critics like Andrew McCabe. Remember him, who has labeled him a danger for potentially joining Donald Trump's cabinet as FBI director. If you don't remember Andrew McCabe, he is the guy who helped the FBI weaponize his department and surveilled Donald Trump illegally. And he set up Russiagate, and he spied on apparently hundreds of thousands of Americans, what the FBI did. So Kash Patel is challenging his detractors to back up their claims with evidence that Kash Patel is somehow a danger and not the FBI and not Andrew McCabe. It's totally empty rhetoric. If we haven't learned that by now, then we're not paying attention, or the legacy media is still lying to us, which they are. But not only that, Kash Patel is focused on rebuilding trust, thankfully, in America's institution. He talks about this with Kudlow. He argues that public confidence can only be restored by exposing corruption, especially in cases like the unlawful surveillance seen during that Russiagate scandal, which Andrew McCabe was very much a part of, and Adam Schiff and those guys. And also the problems within the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense and the FBI and these other institutions. Patel says the American people deserve full transparency from the DOJ to Congress to ensure justice is never weaponized again. Here's part of that conversation with Larry Kudlow.
Whether it's FBI, DOJ, DOD, I think the narrative and the mandate that President Trump received is simple. They want accountability inside of Washington, D.C. I'm not saying everyone in these institutions, far be it from everyone, has corrupted them. But the leadership structure, for example, at the Department of Defense, where I was chief of staff, these 4-star and 3-star generals, a lot of them are fantastic, Larry. But some of them, I don't understand what they're doing. They're there for their next promotion, and they're there to propagate DEI and white rage and climate change. But these are the same folks. When President Trump gets criticized for these appointments, why don't we ask the American public to say, hey, these are the folks that gave us the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. These are the folks that drone struck 7 Afghani children in response to that and didn't take responsibility for that. These are the folks that failed the no-fail mission of the United States and are now leading us into multiple world wars. Of course it's time for a change, and that's what America voted for.
I mean, let's go back to that, this woke Pentagon, DEI Pentagon, et cetera. And Pete Hegseth wrote a brilliant book about that. He's a much decorated military veteran himself and a very smart fellow, as we all know. He's being criticized for this. I think he should be praised for this. I mean, this is a kind of sweep of the Pentagon that you have to have every few, I don't know, 30 years, 40. I mean, nothing, correct me if I'm wrong. George C. Marshall, great wartime leader, had a similar sweep with generals and top officers, redid the headquarters, redid the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I don't know. Have we done anything like this since then? I mean, that was a long time ago, like 75 years ago, some odd.
Well, Ike Eisenhower warned us about it 60 years ago. He said, the defense industrial complex, if you let it, will overtake not just the DOD, but all of Washington, D.C., and it has. And they do a lot of good work. But all of these folks that are in these leadership positions that have corrupted it are running a circular revolving door. Hire me into the DOD, then hire me into your 7-figure payday at this defense industrial contract. By the way, while I was serving as Secretary of Defense, let me make sure you get a $1 billion contract. This has to stop. This has to be broken apart. I mean, you're talking about a Defense Department, just one clear example, in the Ukraine conflict. They didn't lose $1 billion by wasting it. They lost $1 billion. They can't find it.
Right.
And this Department of Defense, and you're the economic guy, has not passed a budget audit in 16 years. Of course it's time for sweeping leadership.
What you mean hasn't passed a budget audit? This is interesting new info.
Yeah, so as Chief of Staff, I oversee the entire Department of Defense, and every year there's an annual financial audit that checks the balances and the books. And the Department of Defense has not passed an audit of its budget in over a decade.
Isn't that something? Now, what about the FBI? There was a great story a couple days ago. I think it was the Washington Times. FBI leaders shocked and stunned at Trump's victory. And then it goes on, it takes the next 20 or so paragraphs that they couldn't believe it happened, and they may have to hand in their resumes. Shocked and so, why would the FBI be so political? That's not their mission. Well, the answer is maybe they're all liberal Democrats over there, and maybe that's part of it, or that they are the ones who were in charge of weaponization. I mean, here, Melania Trump really refused to talk to Jill Biden afterwards because Melania was still furious at the FBI invasion of Mar-a-Lago, down the road from here. What business did they have? What business did the FBI have inviting CNN at 5 a.m. in the morning to bust up Roger Stone's house down in Fort Lauderdale or wherever Roger was living when all they had to do was contact the lawyer? The answer is left-wing politics.
Now, look, as a former national security prosecutor at the Department of Justice, where I worked with FBI agents all across the country and around the world, the question, again, we should be asking those folks that are, quote unquote, outraged, where was your career official outrage when Russiagate occurred and you illegally surveilled a president? Where was your career outrage when hundreds of thousands of Americans were unlawfully surveilled in 1 year alone, just 2 years ago? Where was your outrage when houses of worship were raided or where our children go to school, the FBI was posting up outside? So I didn't see or hear any of that outrage then, but it goes to your point. It shows their political proclivities. And the worst weapon we have in government is a two-tier system of justice that's been weaponized. So I think some of these folks are finally showing us their hypocrisy. And I think it's time that Donald Trump came in there with the sweeping mandate that the American public gave him to return a singular system of constitutional justice. Here's the thing. There is no revenge list. If Donald Trump is successful, he will make these institutions, the FBI, DOJ, DOD, et cetera, successful forever.
Do you hear that? Kash Patel, a singular system of constitutional justice. So I think I butchered the way he phrased it. But yeah, not a two-tiered justice system, which we have seen over the past several years. It's amazing to me. So he's still being considered. He's got the potential for the FBI leadership position, a contender for the FBI director in President-elect Donald Trump's administration. I guess that prospect has sparked some criticism and some debate, but if you want a clean house, he seems like the guy to do it. Some of the alternative candidates for that job, Patel is prominent in this. He's probably the guy that's going to get it. But there's other guys like Mark Morgan, there's Jeff Jensen. They've been floated as potential FBI director candidates. Mike Rogers, the Michigan former congressman, from Michigan and the Senate candidate in this last race with Ulysses Locken. He was considered a big candidate possibility as well, but he was ruled out by Donald Trump's advisor, Dan Scavino. So Mike Rogers apparently not on that list any longer. All right. Thanks for your patience. Those who have been waiting to get their comments into us here at Tom Jordan Live. So we got a few here. We'll address those real quickly. Just bring them up on the screen here. We'll start off with Orlando Hodges. Tom, you are, I can't read that. What does it say? 100%? 100% legs? Legs? I don't know what that means. I love you, Orlando, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm 100% legs. E-media. Is that and media is tainting. Oh, legacy, I get it. Okay, I'm reading here reading between the lines here. I don't have 100% legs, but anyway, legacy media is tainting the issue instead of informing and shedding light. Oh, informing and shedding light. Yeah, typos are a pain, aren't they? Instead of informing and shedding light on this, how should we proceed to understand the issue? Keep talking about it, right? I liked how our experts from Hillsdale College says, how do you understand, how do you eventually get to the truth? How do you weed out the chaff, so to speak, or the tares from the weeds? And you keep talking about it. You keep being open despite the threats to you to be quiet. You know, if you're a man, you can't talk about that issue because you're a man, or whatever they say to you, or those words are hate speech. No, they're not. They're just shedding light on the realities of some very consequential and dangerous issues that are really out there. And this being one of them. You know, you can't come out any longer, in my view, and say that Republicans are a threat to the safety of LGBTQ members and we've got to take them out, and there's death threats actually happening against conservatives, when it's demonstrable now, if you're paying attention, that the opposite is really true. The death threats are coming to those who are ideologically opposed to liberalism. If you don't like it, you got to first be quiet. And who said this? I don't remember who said this, but they said that the surest, it was J.D. Vance. It was brilliant. What does censorship eventually lead to? How do you ultimately keep somebody quiet? You kill them. And that's what happens. That's the history of censorship. You first force them to close their mouth, and if they keep opening it, one sure way to make sure they're quiet is to take them out. And that is a study in history you should take, because that is really the danger of opposing free speech. So, Orlando, what I would say is just keep talking about it. Let the truth be known, or let your opinion be known, and hopefully all of this comes together so we can understand ultimately what the truth of the matter is. All right, let's bring up another comment here. We got some time. Our Paulus is back. An anomaly is not standard, but we're being told the standard is an anomaly. You're absolutely right about this. It's not the norm. And when we say the norm, we mean the regular. This is something that we used to call them special interests. Special interests were a minority need from a minority group of people that should not end up dictating how everyone else lives based on someone's individual need. You can meet that individual's need, but you shouldn't force the entirety of the population to do that if it violates their rights as well. It's an anomaly. You're right about that. Thanks so much. Pearls of Wisdom by R. Paulus. Thanks so much. Let's bring up another one here. We have Arlene Pearson. So good to hear from you and see you, Arlene, as always. I came in late to this broadcast, so not sure this was already discussed. Can't Congress offer a small number of bathrooms for transgenders, i.e. simply single private bathrooms, and end this issue altogether? Don't congressmen, women have their own private bathrooms? If not, I am surprised with all their other perks. That's right on. In fact, that is a situation that you'll see that in, I think, grocery stores and these other, public spaces. Well, they'll provide individual restrooms, and they just say it's open for men or female, whatever. There's no... And that's fair. That would take the issue off the table entirely. And it is true that members of Congress have their own restrooms and their own offices. So I think this is just another excuse to kind of ramp this up and try to force this down people's throats, to make this a huge nationwide discussion again, and how we have to give special rights, special benefits on top of the equal rights that everyone else has, to allow this through. And I think, people are pushing back against it. No, sorry. Because what you're now trying to do is to invalidate a woman's, or a man who doesn't want a woman walking into his locker room. You're trying to invalidate those people's rights to privacy. And so, yeah, but very good point, Arlene. Thank you so much. Let's bring up another one here. We have Taz. Taz is back. Stop, please stop with the made-up term of transgender. A biological man or woman cannot transition to an opposite sex just because they take chemicals and have surgical procedures. Yeah, Taz, I agree. This is a biological issue. I do subscribe to the fact that, listen, there is a biology. And this is how I feel about it. And I know there's going to be people who disagree with me on this, but I do feel, listen, something is amiss. Something's going on here. But I do subscribe to the biological male and biological female as you're born. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring up, but transgender, the term describes someone who has, it's a good description to help us identify who we are discussing. Orlando Hodges is back again. Planned Parenthood is reaping the benefits. They sure are from transgender transitions. They are an independent business on the taxpayer dime. Are they crossing the line? What do you think? I absolutely do. And by the way, I brought up this issue because our real numbers now that Planned Parenthood is so in the business now of making millions of dollars off of transgender surgery, or at least on their way to making millions of dollars. This is their new revenue stream, in addition to abortions. Because you'll remember, most abortion, I think it's now over the 50% of abortions, I think it's like 60% now, happen with a pill now. So Planned Parenthood is thinking, okay, how do we now increase our revenue by doing something else? Well, let's get into the transgender surgery business as well. So that's why they're ramping up, and they've got millions of dollars to spend on legislation and these lobbyists, using lobbyists to wine and dine, Democratic lawmakers to get them in on this as well. So, yep, you're right about that. Planned Parenthood is in on the racket. Thank you so much. I know it's a kind of a controversial segment today, but it was, I think, needed to be talked about because it's front and center now in the news, and we're going to continue to talk about things, even if they stray into these realms of controversy. That's fine, right? We're all about free speech here on Tom Jordan Live. Appreciate you watching today. We will be back here tomorrow on this Thanksgiving week. Tuesday is tomorrow, 9 a.m. Hope to see you then. God bless you.